All right, what's up? Today we're going to talk about boundless will usage. And first, I'll just go over the very basics of what boundless will does. So if you remember, I don't know if you haven't watched the first video in my series where I explain and go over all the skills. I'll just go over it quickly again. So boundless will, if you place it on an ally, your ally will gain 5% damage reduction, and you will gain 3% physical damage. Physical attack. I'm sorry, not physical damage, physical attack. So also, if you use Boundless Will in combination with the Occult Matrix Glyph, this is one that I highly recommend no matter what kind of PvP you're doing. It has bonus effects for your Field of Recovery, your Healing Circle, and your Blade Pentagram. So if I have the dummy marked and I go ahead and I use Blade Pentagram, you'll see that it puts one around me and it puts one around my marked target. Same goes for Healing Circle. I can put one on the dummy, I can put one on myself. So you can do it, on an ally, on an enemy, doesn't matter. It'll always put down one on you and one on the marked target. So this skill, the reason why I made a separate video for Boundless Will is because there's so many uses for it. This can be used offensively and defensively at the beginning of the match, the middle of the match, at the end of the match, whatever. And so I want to go over a few ways that I use it and how I recommend other players do so as well. So we'll first talk about the defensive uses of Boundless Will. So obviously, right, when we mentioned if I mark an ally, I can give him that 5% damage reduction all the time. But in addition, I can also go ahead, for example, you can go ahead and mark, let's say you have a Bard on your team, you've got a ranged Spellsword on your team, or a Summoner, right? Because I say those three, but it can be any class. I know a lot of people like to focus ranged classes at the beginning of a match. So if you think that ally is going to get focused a lot, you can go ahead and put that mark on Boundless Will on that ally. And let's say the ally gets focused a lot, what you can do is you can also go ahead and you can pop Blade Pentagram for them. You can make that cage around them, and it can force cooldowns essentially from your opponent. If they want to chase the ally, right, they either have to use a super armor skill, they have to use a trinket, a CC break or something in order to continue chasing. Or if they don't have it, right, that's even better. They get stunned for 3 seconds, and your ally has 3 seconds of time to either heal, to either run, or to, turn around and to attack the enemy, right? So that's a defensive way to use the cage and Boundless Will. And another way that you can actually do it is you can pop your Healing Circle for your ally. So like I mentioned, it places down 2 Healing Circles with Boundless Will and Occult Matrix. And so you can heal them for a little bit, and they will also benefit if you have the Return to Original Battle Formation glyph. It also doubles the healing for your ally as well. And also, if you have the glyph and you place down 2 Healing Circles, one on yourself, one on your ally, if they overlap, you get double the healing. And that also gets doubled by the glyph. So very, very useful. If you want to use this defensively, you can place it on an ally, place down 2 circles for them. Maybe your ally is able to, maybe kite around maybe a pillar or something out of line of sight and heal up a little bit. Just every little bit counts, right? When you're playing defensively. And also that 5% damage reduction, don't forget about that. It's actually a good amount, and every little bit helps. So that's one way to use Boundless Will defensively on an ally. Now, let's say you are getting focused. You can also use Boundless Will defensively for yourself. If I go ahead and I mark this dummy, that 2% lifesteal that I get really helps. It's not that much, but you can see the healing ticking. And so it can go ahead and it can help you a lot in that aspect. But also, the same goes. Let's say you're focusing, you're getting chased by, maybe a melee or something. You can mark the target. He's going to be on you. So you can pop the Healing Circle and it'll make 2 circles like that, right? You can essentially use the enemy to create 2 circles for yourself. Or if the enemy is chasing you, you can go ahead and put down 2 Blade Pentagrams. And when the Blade Pentagrams overlap, it's extremely difficult for the enemy to keep chasing you without getting CC'd unless they pop cooldowns, right? So that's a good way to use it defensively. Now, another thing that you can do is that if you notice, Boundless Will actually has a 40-meter range. And so it is really, really far. There are no skills in the game that have a 40-meter range, except I think probably Boundless Will, right? So I can, let's say there's an enemy in the distance, right? I can, before I even get within 20 meters, I can mark him and I can put the cage around him even, right? So this can be used offensively. Let's say he's running and I don't want him to run away. I can go ahead and I can pop that, or I can do it from defensively, right? Let's say, you know, that guy is about to focus. Maybe he's a melee class or something, or a range class, and he's trying to get in range of yourself, or he's trying to get in range of one of your allies. You can go ahead and you can pop it there, right? Of course, they can break out if they use a CC, you know, trinket, CC break ability, but you're at least forcing a cooldown. So very, very useful in that aspect. And it can also disrupt a lot of opponents' openers. You know, if they try to, you know, Zerker tries to charge up his phantoms or something, or he's charging Cloud Ripper and he wants to engage on you, you pop that, it'll interrupt his gap closer. One thing, if you remember from the first video that I talked about, is that most gap closing abilities in this game do not have protection. So if they try to get out of that skill, even with a gap closer, they're going to get stunned. So very, very useful, very handy way to use Boundless Will. Now, another way that you can use Boundless Will is using it offensively. So the way that you use it offensively is, let's say I am using Illusory Blade, right? Now, if you look at Illusory Blade, you'll notice that it has an 8-meter range, but Illusory Blade also has to be aimed, right? So you'll see here, it's got the 8-meter range. Obviously, if I use it outside of range, the skill is going to completely whiff. But even if they're in range and you're not really looking at the target and focusing them, you'll notice here, right? I'm within 8 meters range, but I don't really have the I'm not really looking exactly at the dummy. Okay, maybe that was a bad example. That was still within the cone. But you'll see here, for example, let's say the enemy dashes behind me, or they dash, you know, even to the side of me here, right? Like, for example, like this. They dash to the side of me here. I'm going to completely whiff the skill. So you have to be within a certain angle, right? Like a certain cone in order to be able to use Illusory Blade on the enemy. And if they're behind you, you're absolutely going to miss it here. And I'll demonstrate this, right? This happens a lot. Let's say the enemy uses it, or maybe you're trying to focus an enemy and they're trying to focus somebody else, right? And they dash past you towards your ally. They're behind you now. You completely whiff the ability. Well, one thing you can do is you can mark the enemy. And when you mark the enemy, you'll notice here in this situation, let's use the same example. Let's say they're behind you, right? Like they dash behind you. Instead of turning your camera around and then having to aim it again, if they're behind you and you're within 8 meters range, if I have it marked, I don't even have to look at the target. And you can see that the skill essentially auto aims itself. So this is one way to use it offensively with Illusory Blade. And that's a little nifty, you know, tip, a nifty tool. But I don't really recommend doing this. And the reason for that is because, you know, when you're using Illusory Blade, it's worth it to spend the extra second, half second, or however long to readjust your camera and aim it. I prefer, when I'm using Boundless Will, to use it on an ally, you know, in order to help them out more. Because if you can keep an ally alive for longer, it's absolutely worth it, and it can greatly increase your chances of winning a game. So I like to do that for the defensive purposes rather than the offensive purposes. But sometimes you need to, right? Sometimes either maybe your allies are dead, or maybe they're focusing you instead, right? And you need to get a quick Illusory Blade off. You don't even have to be looking at the target to mark them. You can go ahead, you can mark them, and then you can use Illusory Blade. Just like that. And this really, really helps. And so that's why I really don't recommend players marking the enemy with Boundless Will unless you have a very good reason to do so. So then the next thing I'll talk about is advanced usage, is that you can actually change Boundless Will very, very quickly, right? You can have like a 1-second cooldown between changing targets. And so you can actually change Boundless Will targets mid-match. And this is something that I don't see a lot of people do. I see most people, what they'll do is they'll mark an ally or something, or mark the enemy, and they just won't change it for the rest of the match at all. And so I think, especially a lot of times in 3v3, right, your opponents will change targets, right? Maybe your ally pops a defensive damage reduction buff and then they switch targets and something like that. You want to be able to quickly change targets and change to an ally or an enemy. Now, one thing that you can actually do though is you'll see often in 3v3, people will automatically have little icons above their head, right? And that's like the mark targets. And you'll have, I guess it doesn't show here, but there's little icons that you can use to mark targets with. And if you go into settings here, you'll actually see under the targeting, you can quickly target either a team member, right? You can do Shift F3, or you can change this keybind. You can quickly, very, very quickly swap targets for your allies and mark them as long as you're within 40 meters of the ally. You can use these hotkeys to quickly target an ally and quickly change the mark, or you can actually do it on enemies too. So enemies with those marks, right? If you have this mark coin as the target, right? If you have them marked, you can actually use these keybinds to quickly change targets to the marked enemy. And so before a match, you would have to change it to a specific mark or ask the party leader to change specific marks, but you can use these to quickly swap between enemy targets. These I don't have set up that much because you can honestly, I play in tab target mode, and so I can swap targets with tab quickly. But if you get really advanced, you can go ahead and you can use those to mark and swap marks. I do use the ally keybinds quite a bit though to swap between allies if they're getting targeted, if they're getting focused. And so that's one thing that you can do that will really help you and change your game up a little bit. All right, I think that's about it. I covered pretty much everything with Boundless Will. Unfortunately, it doesn't affect the other skills really. Like it still doesn't affect attack in all directions. You still have to aim that. Even if you have the enemy marked, it's not going to auto aim for you. But it is something to help you with the blade pentagram, with the field of recovery, and with the illusory blade. So I hope you guys have learned some of these tools and you can go ahead and use them in action. I don't always use the Boundless Will defensively. Sometimes I do use it offensively, and so sometimes I do use it defensively for myself as well. It just depends what's going on in the 3v3 situation, because there's so many different situations and there's no one size fits all for all of them. So thank you guys for watching. Hope you guys learned something. I'll see you guys in the next video.